Order, order. Imran Hussain to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's of course a pleasure to speak under your chairmanship. As a British parliamentarian, I remain proud of my roots in Pakistan and Kashmir, and therefore I continue to be privileged to be the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Kashmir, which has support from across the political spectrum, has worked across Parliament, engaged with government ministers around one simple principle, and that is the inalienable human right of Kashmiris must always come first, which is why this debate is extremely timely, as members across this House continue to be extremely concerned at the seriously escalating tensions in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. But before I go on to this, let me put some points on the record very clearly. Madam Chair, for over a decade, I have called out the persecution, oppression and injustice faced by Kashmiris in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Their calls for justice have too often gone unanswered. Their fundamental human rights have been violated. Their right to self-determination has been repeatedly denied to them. For over a decade, I have called out and challenged the most repressive and draconian security legislation, the Indian Armed Forces Special Powers Act, the Public Safety Act, and the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Legislation which continues to be used to give the Indian Armed Forces sweeping powers of detention and immunity to persecute journalists, human rights defenders, political activists and ordinary civilians. And we all saw in August 2019 when the right-wing Modi government unilaterally and illegally revoked Articles 370 and 35A, stripping Jammu and Kashmir of its special constitutional status. That was followed by mass detentions and unprecedented communications blackouts, severe restrictions on civil liberties and the further erosion of democratic rights. I led the campaign in this place on every single forum to call out the illegal actions of the Modi regime. And I want to today reassure the sons and daughters of Kashmir who remain under oppression in Indian-occupied Kashmir, your voices will never be silenced and they will continue to be heard loudly and clearly in this place. Madam Chair, I want to make another point for the record before I move into the substantial part of this debate, and that's this. There is no comparison between the long-term systematic human rights abuses that have taken place in Indian-occupied Kashmir and the current situation in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. The scale, duration and nature of the repression in Indian-occupied Kashmir remains in a different category altogether. But that does not mean we should remain silent when serious concerns arise. And that brings me to the deeply troubling and worrying situation we have witnessed in recent weeks in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. Members from across this House have been contacted by deeply distressed constituents unable to reach loved ones because of the lockdown and communications blackout imposed on parts of Azad Kashmir, now well into its fourth week.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Of course I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I have been inundated with representations from my constituents who have friends, family and loved ones in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, deeply concerned at this blackout that's been going on for a month. Would my honourable friend agree with me that the only way forward on this is peaceful resolution and for the government of Pakistan to return to peaceful table talks, and our government can play an important role in making those representations to the Pakistani government?
I thank my honourable friend, and he is absolutely right, and I'll come on to that point shortly. For over 1 million British Kashmiris, over 50,000 of whom were demonstrating on these streets of London over the weekend, this is not a distant foreign policy issue. These are their parents, their brothers, their sisters, their family. They have been worried, sick, staring at silent phones, waiting for a call that does not come, hoping that people they love are safe. I will take the honourable gentleman and then honourable lady. I will ask honourable members to be extremely brief because I have a substantial contribution to make.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I thank him for his work as chair of the APPG. I've also been contacted by residents. I've got residents in Stoke-on-Trent North who live on both sides of the line of control and are seriously worried, and we've had reports of food shortages, medical supplies, baby milk. So would my honourable friend agree with me that the UK government must do all it can to make sure we open up all humanitarian routes possible?
I'll take the honourable lady first, who may make a very similar point.
My honourable friend is correct. I met recently with many constituents in my office who were deeply concerned by the internet blackout, unable to find if their families are okay, and telling me some horrendous stories, including one story unverified that a 2-year-old child has been shot. Their major concern is the food shortages and the lack of medicines that can go in. And does my honourable friend agree with me that these blockades must stop immediately so that children can survive?
I thank both my honourable friends, and I absolutely agree with both of them. And they will know, as chair of the APPG on Kashmir, I coordinated a letter to the Foreign Secretary calling for urgent diplomatic engagement to address these very issues, tabled an early day motion, which now combined has the support of over 70 parliamentarians from across this House, and I'm grateful for all colleagues. We've met with ministers, convened emergency parliamentary meetings through the APPG, because this House cannot simply look away. We have all seen deeply concerning reports of continued bloodshed, of arbitrary arrests, restrictions on communications, a breakdown in dialogue with representatives of the grassroots groups, and more recently reports suggesting restrictions on the movement of food and medical supplies into parts of Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, point that's been made. Now, these reports are profoundly concerning. We've also seen reports that those seeking to act as peaceful arbitrators, including senior Pakistani politicians, have themselves been prevented from entering Azad Kashmir. This cannot help de-escalate the situation. Groups like the Joint Awami Action Committee have for many months sought to pursue peaceful negotiations around long-standing civic, governance and economic concerns. There was a commitment that these issues would be resolved through dialogue. And I make this point, Madam Chair, criminalising grassroots movements can never be a solution. As many will know, most of the reasonable demands were negotiated and met, and there remains a number of issues outstanding, most importantly the one of the 12 refugee seats. Now, of course, there will be strongly held views on all sides of that issue, but whatever view one takes, ordinary Kashmiris should not be made to pay the price for a failure to return to peaceful table talks. It is therefore deeply unfortunate that the situation has deteriorated to this point. So I say to the government of Pakistan, I say to the government of Azad Kashmir, and I say to the Joint Awami Action Committee, the answer must be dialogue. The answer must be restraint. The answer must be peaceful negotiations. And I also welcome the efforts made in recent days by political figures and others who have called for an immediate return to negotiations. Those seeking to lower the temperature deserve the full support of this House. I will.
He talks eloquently about the need to lower the temperature and de-escalate the situation, but one of my constituents who was visiting Kashmir and relatives recently saw with his very own eyes a relative who was shot by the Pakistani authorities and was too terrified to go to hospital because he feared reprisals. Doesn't he agree that the shooting of unarmed civilians and peaceful protesters is something that this country and neither any country should tolerate?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and whilst all the reports, because of the communications blackout, have not emerged in full, these reports continue to concern and should do, quite rightly, this whole House. I also want to say that there are those who use inflammatory and divisive language. My message to them is they do not help anyone. And I say this, successive Pakistani High Commissioners and ministers have engaged constructively with the All-Party Parliamentary Group in the past. So I say to the governments of Pakistan and Azad Kashmir, what message are they giving to over 1 million British Kashmiris? What message with regards to human rights are they sending to the international community? I also want to thank the Minister who could not be with us today but is well represented, no doubt. The Minister has been in regular meetings with me and with the All-Party Parliamentary Group. I know the Minister visited Pakistan and continues to monitor the situation and raise the matter directly. So, Madam Chair, again, today, we in this House make an appeal of our own government to send a direct appeal to the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the government of Azad Kashmir, and to ensure this situation ends immediately. The lockdown and communications blackout must end. Any restrictions affecting the movement of food and medical supplies must end. Those acting as peaceful mediators must be allowed immediate access. Meaningful table talks with grassroots groups must resume immediately. And at the heart of those negotiations must remain one principle above all others: respect for the human rights of Kashmiris. Our government must play its role for the 1 million British Kashmiris impacted by this situation. It must continue using every appropriate diplomatic channel to encourage restraint, de-escalation and dialogue. And ultimately, peace and dialogue, Madam Chair, must prevail. There is only one sustainable path forward: peaceful table talks. As Chair of the APPG on Kashmir, I will continue to work constructively with all those prepared to pursue that objective. I will continue to stand up for and be the voice for over 1 million British Kashmiris with family who continue to be directly affected by these events. We will continue to speak out whenever the human rights of Kashmiris are threatened, and I will continue to push for a peaceful resolution in which the voices, dignity and fundamental rights of the Kashmiri people are placed where they always should have been, at the very heart of any lasting settlement. I commend this motion to the House.
May I remind members that they need to stand if they intend to speak, because there are a lot more people in the chamber than there are on my list, and you needed to be here at the start of the debate in order to be able to make a speech. So stand if you wish to speak if you were here at the start of the debate. Thank you. The question is that this House has considered government support for human rights in Kashmir. Jim Shannon.
A real pleasure to serve under your chairship, and a big thank you to the Honourable Gentleman for Bradford East for setting this scene. And I commend him for his words of wisdom and his direction for finding a peaceful policy in the way forward. I've supported the Honourable Gentleman every time he's had this debate over the years, and I'm very happy to be here again to do the very same thing again. I declare an interest as Chair of the APPG for freedom of religious belief, and also the Chair of the Pakistan Religious Minority. So this is something that's very close to my heart, and the Honourable Gentleman has put forward the case incredibly well. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to speak in this matter, and I commend all those honourable members who have consistently brought the plight of the Kashmiri people before this House. I was speaking on this matter before. I make no apology for returning to it. The situation in Kashmir is not a distant abstraction or distraction. It's a lived reality for millions of human beings, people with families, with faith, with hopes for their children. And this United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland has both a historic connection to that region and a moral obligation to speak truth to power. I look forward to the Minister's answers to, and Honourable Lady is much liked and much respected by all of us in this House. We look very much forward to her contribution. Kashmir, divided, disputed and suffering, represents one of the most protracted human rights crises of our age. Whether we speak of India, Indian-administered Kashmir or Pakistan-administered Kashmir, the reality for ordinary men, women and children on the ground is one of fear, of repression and of silenced voices. Amnesty International has documented with harrowing clarity the realities of life in Kashmir: arbitrary detention, torture, restrictions on freedom of assembly, and the suffocation of civil society, and many killings and injuries. These are not abstractions. These are human beings deserving of dignity, of justice and freedom. So I think of the words, and I use this, and I always try to if I'm having a debate, I think of the words of Micah chapter 6 verses 8 in the Holy Bible. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly? And I believe that's my reason why I'm here, to obey that Holy Scripture and speak up for my brothers and sisters across the world, wherever their human rights are being suppressed and wherever they've been persecuted. That, as I say, Madam Chair, is the standard of this House, and we must hold ourselves to it when we speak of Kashmir. I've been in delegations to Pakistan in the past. I'm due to return again, if God spares me, because I feel so strongly about the human rights of the people of that part of the world. I've sat with community leaders, with religious minorities, with mothers and fathers who simply want safety and freedom for their children, freedom of religion or belief. That intricate, God-given right is denied across the Kashmir region. Muslim communities, Hindu communities, Sikh communities, Christian communities all have experienced the fragile nature of life when the state does not protect fundamental rights as it should. The situation in India administered Kashmir since the revocation of Article 370 in 2019 has illustrated, I believe, the dangers of unchecked executive power, communications blackouts, thousands detained, journalists criminalised. In Pakistan, administered Kashmir, the democratic accountability remains a transformative aspiration rather than a lived reality. Can we honestly say in this House that we're doing all in our power to stand against this? Well, today is an opportunity to say that, to transfer us all to show our united resolve to speak up for our brothers and sisters in Kashmir. Well, I conclude with this, Madam Chair, because I'm conscious of your time, and you told me earlier. We must utilise and use every diplomatic channel, bilateral, multilateral, through the United Nations, to press both India and Pakistan to uphold their international human rights obligations. And I look to the Minister this afternoon to ascertain how we can seek to play our part in ensuring that the people of Kashmir are not disenfranchised from justice by geopolitical convenience. The heartbeat of our foreign policy, of this government's foreign policy, must be not only simple human rights, but actually must mean simple humanity. And for that simple humanity that I speak. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And I thank my honourable friend, the member for Bradford East, for securing this important debate. My constituency of Luton South and South Bedfordshire is a vibrant and diverse area, and we have residents with far-reaching global connections. And this includes a large first, second and third generation British Kashmiri diaspora for whom Luton is home, where they've built their lives, raised their children, but who also maintain very strong familial ties to the region and regularly travel back to Kashmir to see relatives and loved ones. One recent example of the strong ties between Luton and Kashmir is our community's remarkable fundraising effort over the past 2 years. In 2024, UK charity Kids Operating Room approached myself and my honourable friend, the member for Luton North, because of Luton's close connection to Kashmir, to seek support to help build a new paediatric operating theatre in Coatley. Led by local GP Dr Tahir Mahmood, our Luton community and other donors raised more than £300,000 to fund the establishment of a fully equipped children's operating theatre at District Headquarters Hospital in Coatley. The project delivered over 3,300 pieces of specialist equipment, bringing life-saving care closer to thousands of children. This powerful intervention from our Luton community to support a universal human right, access to healthcare, highlights just how connected our Luton community is with Kashmir, and also why many of my constituents are deeply concerned about the ongoing human rights abuses taking place in the region. As my honourable friend has set out so eloquently, periods of unrest in the region, followed by authoritarian crackdowns, have become increasingly common, and we're once again seeing serious human rights concerns unfolding. The latest unrest began after peaceful protests against the Pakistani government's proposed electoral changes, which many feared would weaken political representation. On 5th of June, a movement was banned, and subsequently there were mobile and internet blackouts. And this has resulted in many of my constituents being unable to contact family and loved ones, while British nationals remain stranded in the region without communication or a way to return home. Reports indicate that more than 100 activists and journalists have been arrested, with roadblocks and travel restrictions effectively sealing off the region. Clashes between protesters and police have also resulted in several deaths and many injuries. And whilst every government has a responsibility to maintain public safety, over recent years we've seen unlawful use of tear gas and lethal force used, and both protesters and police officers killed, which seems to demonstrate a pattern of disproportionate action, preventing freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, or access to communication with the outside world. We're all very aware of the political tensions in Kashmir, and the UK is home to significant diaspora communities of Pakistanis, Indians, Kashmiris. Emerging issues related to Kashmir therefore have the potential to affect our community cohesion here if we're not handling them sensitively. So I will conclude, because I know the ministers are very alive to these issues, and would my honourable friend ensure that any dialogue and actions relating to events in Kashmir are handled seriously and sensitively with consideration of the concerns of the diaspora communities? And can she elaborate what discussions she is having with counterparts in Pakistan to ensure human rights are being upheld in Kashmir and communication lines fully restored? And could she provide an update on steps being taken to identify and support British nationals who are stuck in the region and assist them with returning home? And for my constituents, it's vital we continue to use our influence on the international stage to remain steadfast in our commitment to ensuring equal and inalienable rights for all around the world, including Kashmiri's rights to self-determination. And we call out any government or regime who are infringing upon these rights.
I intend to start the front bench speeches at 5:08. So can members please make sure that they keep their remarks as short as possible. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Ms Harris, for calling me in this debate. I will be very brief because others wish to speak. I first of all want to put on record my thanks to the member for Bradford and the member for Leeds East for the huge work they've done consistently on the issue of Kashmir, and the way that the member for Bradford has chaired the group on Kashmir, which has made a huge difference and meant that the issue has been properly debated in Parliament. And I think the contribution just made by the member for Strangford actually brought together the whole issue, which is fundamentally the way Kashmir was treated at the time of Indian independence. It's an overhanging colonial responsibility for Britain, which has never been resolved. It was referred to the United Nations in 1948, and that's where it still is. And so at some point that issue will have to be returned to. At some issue it'll have to be a recognition that this is an international issue that requires an international solution to it. The immediate crisis is in a sense symptomatic of the partition of Kashmir with the line of control between Indian-administered Jammu Kashmir and Pakistan-administered Azad Kashmir. And the situation in Azad Kashmir at the moment is frankly terrible. I have constituents who have family there, or constituents, some of whom are there at the moment. And the information getting back to us is there are shortages of just about everything. There's an inability to move about. There are very high prices for food. There are irrational detentions of people for taking part in protest, and general suppression of any level of civil and political activity. That is what happens when the economy spirals out of control and people cannot eat or eat themselves or be able to feed their children properly. So something has to be done. At the very least, one would hope that the British government, and I look forward to the Minister's response, will be able to put whatever pressure it can on the administration in Azad Kashmir and be firmly in touch with the Pakistan government through the High Commission here to ensure there is a lifting of the sanctions, there is a return of universal access to the internet, and there is free movement around Azad Kashmir, and actually a preparedness to engage in this whole issue as a way of bringing about long-term peace and stability within the region. Too many people are suffering, too much tension is going on, and too much abuse of power is taking place at this very moment.
Hali.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's indeed a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I would like to thank the member for Bradford East for securing this important debate. And I speak here not only as a British Kashmiri, but someone who was born in Kashmir. And having left that part of the world when I was a few months old, it is not unusual for me to hear what's going on in the main across Kashmir. And let us not be under any doubt that the disruption and the dispute that's happening in Azad Jammu Kashmir currently has no equivalence or any comparison with what is happening on Indian-occupied Kashmir. The principal enemy to the Kashmiri people's basic rights and dignity remains the extremist BJP government in New Delhi. Last November, 10 United Nations appointed human rights experts condemned India's string of arbitrary arrests, torture and lynchings of Kashmiris over the past couple of years. They highlighted reports of house demolitions and other tactics of collective punishment being used against Kashmiri Muslims. Even the Indian Supreme Court, which has many times been complicit in the oppression of Kashmiri people, had ruled against such actions in 2024. However, Modi's thugs do not care about their own law, let alone international law and morality. Day after day, families find their sons missing and then dead in canals and ditches, unexplained disappearances, later ruled by the authorities as suspected suicides. Day after day, we receive new torture, the old and the young, children and young alike. No one is spared. It is all too obvious what is happening. The Indian state tries to hide away all of its crime by suspending over 8,000 social media accounts, including accounts of independent journalists, and imposing media blackouts, but still the truth comes out. For as long as the Kashmiri people are oppressed by the extremist BJP regime, we will continue to call them out. Yet, every time we do raise this, the government reads the usual script that this is a bilateral matter between Pakistan and India. Kashmir is never a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. Never will be, never has been. It is a mess that was left by a British Labour government in 1948, and we have a Labour government that can actually put that wrong to right now. And now's the time to step up. What is happening in Azad Jammu Kashmir? 38-point plan demands that were put to the government, 36 have been met. There is a dispute over 2 points, one of them being the 12 appointed seats that purportedly represent the Kashmiri migrants. The only way to resolve that is through peaceful negotiations and talks. And that can only happen if we've got flexibility on both sides. Well, it's a three-side. It's the Pakistani government, Azad Jammu and Kashmir government, and the Awami Action Committee. Someone needs to coordinate and facilitate them talks, and the British government can play its part. What we take objection to is the direct shooting of innocent civilians, 18 of whom have at least lost their lives. Internet blackout needs to be restored so families can stay in connection. But most importantly, those people that voice their concerns in this country are often find themselves targeted by their families being harassed over in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. That has to stop. They're actually tortured, they're actually harassed, and then they are made to read out public statements. That is violations of all international law, and that cannot continue to happen, that cannot be allowed to happen. I'll give way on that.
some of my constituents have now been labelled as terrorists because they have spoken out and are now unable to travel to visit their families should even the blockade stop. Does he agree with me that this type of draconian abuse of the law must stop and my constituents should not be labelled as such for speaking out?
I absolutely agree with that intervention, that no one's views, no matter how harsh, how difficult they might sound, it should reflect as a means of torture or as a means of extracting or distracting them away from the agenda by making their families or relatives in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, to actually feel the brunt of what's being said here. Now, none of us can actually agree to what's happening in Azad and Jammu and Kashmir by the authorities, because they're blockading baby milk, they're blockading food, they're blockading internet access. That has to be lifted. Talks have to resume, and when talks resume, that's the only way we can find peaceful settlement to this saga that's rolling out for the past few weeks in Azad Kashmir.
Well said.
To be serving under your chairship. Can I start by thanking the Honourable Member for Bradford East, not only for his work on the APPG on Kashmir, but for also securing this debate. And there are two distinct issues. The first is around India-occupied Kashmir, and then what we are now witnessing in the region of Azad and Jammu and Kashmir. Insofar as the Indian-occupied Kashmir is concerned, for decades, the people in that region have been oppressed. It's something that has been raised on numerous occasions, on very different platforms, including the United Nations, and we know that there are many resolutions that have simply been ignored. I suppose the prime point which I would like to make follows on from the Honourable Member for Hall Green, is the British government's position. Historically, it has been said that we have two nuclear power nations, and this is a bilateral issue. It is, in fact, in my view, and I certainly hope that the government can take away the position as set out by a number of honourable members in this chamber, where you have two nations that have nuclear capabilities, it becomes an international issue. And in my respectful view, I suspect that if the British government was to adopt a multilateral or even an international position, that would certainly help resolve the region which we know is the most militarized zone in the whole world. And you have torture, rape, extrajudicial killings frequently taking place in that region. If I can just simply come back to what's close to home, and I say home because we've all seen demonstrations here in London, not on one occasion, but on multiple occasions. The United Kingdom is home to about 1.4 million British Kashmiris. They've got heritage in that region, they've got family and friends. I'm not going to repeat what's already been set out. In fact, you'll find British Kashmiris scattered around virtually every constituency within the United Kingdom. So it comes to no surprise that there are more than 70 members of Parliament that have signed a joint letter asking for diplomacy and dialogue. And one of the biggest problems we have when there is a vacuum in terms of information is that you do not get to know what is happening. And that in itself has caused enormous anxieties for families that live within the United Kingdom and have heritage or have family back in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. And I am grateful to the chair of the APPG for the work that he's doing. I've had a number of meetings with the acting High Commissioner of Pakistan, who has been open and transparent about what they want to see and how they want to resolve matters. As someone who has direct heritage, I was, like my honourable member for Hall Green, born in that region. I'm more than happy to assist in mediation if our government is in negotiations with the Pakistani government so that we can come to a sensible resolution. Thank you, Chair.
Well done.
Will Forster, Lib Dem spokesperson.
Thank you, Ms Harris. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship this afternoon. I want to start by thanking my honourable friend for Bradford East for securing this debate. And it's quite clear where I stand on this issue because I co-signed the letter from him late last month. Human rights abuses in Kashmir deeply matters to my constituents in Woking. Over half of them have got ancestry and links with Kashmir of my local Asian population. It's an issue that is fundamental and is raised with me, particularly over the last month regularly. And that's why I'm here to represent them, to ensure that the British government shows some leadership and ensures that civil liberties are returned to normal in Kashmir. The Liberal Democrats and I condemn the reports of excessive and unlawful use of force against the people in Kashmir. For the last 2 years, the government has arrested, banned and clashed with people protesting over flour and electricity costs. For the last month, things have got worse still. These actions have been condemned by human rights groups such as Amnesty International, who have argued that the state has been weaponising anti-terror laws as a legal excuse to crush peaceful protest. Peaceful protesters aspiring for equal rights should never be criminalised. I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend, the member for Woking, for allowing me to intervene because many of my Slough constituents are deeply concerned about the safety and well-being of their loved ones in Pakistan-administered Kashmir as tensions continue to rise and communications blackouts and obstructions persist. Does my honourable friend agree that it's vital that peace negotiations take place between the relevant parties so that we can ensure an end to the violence and a sustained stability in the region?
I completely agree with my honourable friend for Slough. Britain has got a long history in the region. I believe we can play a force for good for a change in that region to bring about peace, and I will talk about that later. Dictatorships, not democracies, trigger communications blackouts when they do not want to know, when they want to hide what's happening. And I'm afraid that's what's happening in Kashmir at the moment. Removing access to the internet and phone networks are tools of oppression. We've seen that in Iran. I don't want to see that in Kashmir too. The communications blackout demonstrates just how dire the situation has become. I believe 200 people have been killed in the last month due to reports. But because of that communications blackout, we just do not know. British Kashmiris, UK residents with connections there have been cut off from contacting their loved ones, including British citizens currently in the region. Although I want to focus on the immediate issues in Kashmir today, I think it's fair to say a long-term and stable resolution in Kashmir can only be achieved by putting human rights, democratic aspirations and the self-determination of the Kashmiri people at the centre of our foreign policy. We believe that we need a lasting peace, and we can only do that with the explicit consent of the Kashmiri people. For decades, British governments have hidden behind the convenient diplomatic fiction that Kashmir is strictly a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. The Liberal Democrats and I urge the government to remember its historic and moral responsibilities as the co-author of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 47. The UK must champion the democratic mechanism for a free, fair and impartial referendum as originally mandated under international law. The Liberal Democrats call on the government to reject the unilateral changes to Kashmir's status. We believe that only constitutional reform or future governance structures must be led by and agreed upon those democratic aspirations, and the human rights of Kashmiri people needs to be front and centre. I want to come back to the matter of hand and the concerns with Kashmir right now, and that's why I've got some questions to the Minister. How often has the British government raised issues in Kashmir with the Pakistan government and the High Commission? When was the last time? When they're going to do so again? And when was the last time our Prime Minister spoke to the government in Pakistan? And finally, Ms Harris, what steps is the government taking to ensure that British nationals in the region and British citizens with families there are able to access support and maintain contact for loved ones?
Shadow Minister Andrew Snowden.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to serve with you in the chair, Ms Harris, and to the honourable member for Bradford East for securing this debate. It is the second debate he has secured. I've had the pleasure of responding to as Shadow Minister, and as I'm also the chair of the APPG for Sri Lanka, I know how much effort goes into running geographic APPGs, particularly where there are real difficulties and sensitivities that need to be navigated. So I thank him for his work. Kashmir remains one of the most sensitive disputes, with its impacts stretching far beyond the region's borders. It continues to have profound implications not only for the people who live in the region, but for wider regional stability and for the diaspora communities here in the United Kingdom with close family and cultural ties to Kashmir. There is agreement across the House that allegations of human rights abuses should concern us all wherever they occur. Those concerns should not be viewed through the prism of geopolitics or partisan politics, but through our shared commitment to universal human rights, the rule of law and democratic freedoms. The long-standing position of the Conservative Party is clear. We have never sought to prescribe a solution to the constitutional status of Kashmir. We believe that it is for India and Pakistan to find a lasting political resolution through peaceful dialogue, taking into account the wishes of the Kashmiri people. Equally, however, we have consistently argued that the United Kingdom should not shy away from raising credible allegations of human rights abuses wherever they arise, and should encourage both countries to uphold their international obligations. I note the honourable gentleman brought this debate today with a firm eye on the current situation in Azad, Kashmir. Reports of the use of force against protesters, internet shutdowns, arrests under anti-terrorism legislation and the intimidation of political activists are of grave concern. Human rights are universal and should be defended consistently, irrespective of which authority is responsible. Recent events have also demonstrated how fragile the security situation remains. The appalling terrorist attack last year, in which 26 people were killed, was a reminder of the continuing threat posed by terrorism in the region. There can be no justifications for attacks deliberately targeting civilians. India has every right to defend its citizens against terrorism through lawful, reasonable and proportionate means. At the same time, all parties have a responsibility to pursue dialogue wherever possible. Against that backdrop, I would like to ask the Minister a number of questions. First, how is the government using its diplomatic engagement with both India and Pakistan to encourage constructive dialogue on human rights while maintaining the UK's long-standing position that the dispute itself should be resolved peacefully by the parties? Secondly, what discussions has the Foreign Office had with both governments regarding allegations of arbitrary detention, restrictions on journalists and civil society organisations, and the protection of religious freedom across Kashmir? Thirdly, given that both India and Pakistan are members of the Commonwealth, what assessment has the Minister made of the role Commonwealth institutions could play in encouraging dialogue on human rights and confidence-building measures between the countries? Fourthly, following the recent protests in Azad, Kashmir, what representations has the government made regarding the reported use of force against demonstrators and the importance of thorough, transparent and independent investigations into allegations of wrongdoing? Given the recent terrorist attack last year and the subsequent escalation in tensions between India and Pakistan, what assessment has the government made of the current security situation, and what steps are ministers taking with international partners to reduce the risk of further military escalation between two nuclear-armed states? And finally, with elections due to take place on the 27th of July in the region, what steps are the government taking with international partners to ensure the elections are free from interference and fair for all those who seek to participate? The United Kingdom enjoys important relationships with both India and Pakistan. Those relationships should enable us to have candid conversations where necessary, supporting dialogue, encouraging respect for human rights, condemning terrorism in all its forms, and promoting regional stability are not contradictory objectives. They are mutually reinforcing. The opposition will continue to support a balanced and principled approach, one that encourages peaceful dialogue, upholds international human rights standards, and seeks lasting stability for all the people of Kashmir. I look forward to hearing from the Minister on how the government intend to advance those objectives in the months ahead.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And can I just start by saying my thanks to the member for Bradford East for securing this debate, and I also want to thank all members for their contribution to this debate, including the honourable member for Bradford West, who couldn't be at the debate today, but has continuously raised this issue with the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. It is clear from today's discussion that there remains strong interest across the House in the situation in Kashmir, and deep concerns for the welfare rights and aspirations of people living on all sides of the line of control. As we have heard once again today, this issue continues to resonate strongly with many communities across the United Kingdom, including those with family, cultural and emotional ties to the region. So, happy to give way.
Way. I've been contacted in recent weeks by many constituents who are desperately worried for their loved ones in Kashmir and are struggling to reach them due to the communications blockade. Does the Minister agree with me that communications shutdowns like this, which have also been used by Indian-occupied Kashmir, are often an attempt by authorities to hide and to cover up the crimes and human rights abuses that they're committing? And what assurances can she give us that the government will put pressure on the Pakistani government to stop any blockade?
Communication. I thank my honourable friend for raising this issue. The communication blackout is an issue of concern, and that is the reason why the Minister for the Middle East has met with the Pakistani government in June to raise the government's concerns. So, with regards to the government's current policy, let me begin by setting out the government's position. The UK has strong and long-lasting relationships with both countries, and we have consistently encouraged both sides to maintain dialogue and pursue lasting political solutions that support regional stability and security. That's why the government's position remains that it is for India and Pakistan to find a lasting political resolution to a situation in Kashmir, taking into account the wishes of the Kashmiri people. It is not for the UK to prescribe a solution or to act as a mediator. This remains the consistent position of successive UK governments.
With the United Nations resolutions about human rights violations, the United Kingdom has many agreements with India, commercial agreements. Does the Minister agree that where United Nations resolutions are not being followed, that we should look at sanctioning them through our trade agreements?
I would just say, regarding this particular issue, I think the UK has always remained its stance and its position since the 1970s. And the stance still remains as to what it is in the current day. I know a number of honourable members have raised concerns regarding recent events in parts of Pakistan-administered Kashmir, known locally as the Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. The government is concerned by reports of unrest, loss of life and injuries during recent protests in the region. We have followed developments closely and have discussed them with Pakistani authorities. We are also aware of concerns relating to communication restrictions in the region. Now, these restrictions have been especially concerning for British nationals and for members of British Kashmiri diasporas seeking contact with friends and family. The safety and welfare of British nationals remains our highest priorities. And in light of developments on the ground, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office updated its travel advice and currently advises against all but essential travel to the region. Those already in the region should leave and avoid potential disruptions. More broadly, whenever allegations of human rights violation arise, whether in India-administered Kashmir or Pakistan-administered Kashmir, our position is clear. We encourage all governments to ensure that their domestic laws and practices are consistent with international standards. Any allegations of human rights abuse should be investigated thoroughly, promptly and transparently. Effective engagement with affected communities is essential. Happy to give way.
I'm grateful for the Minister. I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way, but would she agree that when we discuss Kashmir, we must remember that there are distinct realities? The Indian-administered Kashmir has faced decades of conflict, crackdowns and human rights abuses and is the heaviest or most militarized region in the world. And whereas the current situation in Azad Kashmir is worrying, but the two cannot be conflated. The priority in Azad Kashmir must be an immediate return to peaceful dialogue and negotiations. Does she agree?
I would agree that the issue in the region is concerning, especially in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. Like I said earlier to the Honourable Member, that is the reason why the Minister for the Middle East is continuing to raise this issue with the Pakistani government. So I know today that several Honourable Members have spoken about the human rights in India-administered Kashmir. We regularly raise human rights concerns with partners around the world, including India and Pakistan, and we continue to encourage all states to uphold their international obligations. The House has also heard calls for the United Kingdom to play a more direct role in resolving the dispute. And I understand the strength of the feeling behind these views. However, the government believes that durable progress can only be achieved through peaceful engagement by those directly concerned. Our role is to encourage dialogue, support stability, advocate for human rights, and reduce the risk of escalation. Now, recent events have also served as a reminder of the importance of maintaining calm in a region that has experienced periods of heightened tension. The United Kingdom has consistently encouraged de-escalation, restraint, and diplomacy, and we will continue to engage with partners across the region in support of peace and stability. Now, I know today that many members have raised concerns about communication restrictions, such as the member for Bradford East, Leeds East, Stoke-on-Trent North, Stoke-on-Trent South, Birmingham, Hall Green, and the member for Slough. I understand that communication restrictions are particularly concerning for those with ties in the region, and these issues have also been raised by my constituents in Coventry North West. The continued use of some internet restriction is worrying, and the United Kingdom is clear on the importance of rights being fully respected. It is important to ensure effective and constructive dialogue with the communities affected. And as I've said earlier, that is why the Minister has raised this concerns with the Pakistani government. With regards to human rights abuses raised by the member for Rochdale, Luton South and South Bedfordshire, we strongly support individuals' rights to freedom of assembly and expression and peaceful political protest. We have consistently emphasised that any human rights violation should be fully investigated in line with international human rights law. Our overseas networks continue to monitor human rights issues across the country and raises these when appropriate with the government of Pakistan. We...
Yeah.
I'm listening to the Minister, and I appreciate that she is supporting the Minister who's not in his place this afternoon. But just on the point of this issue of bilateral working, the UK government has settled positions on Somalia, on Crimea, on the conflict in Israel and Palestine. We don't recognise Northern Cyprus. There's a whole host of areas of disputed territory where we as a government have taken a position and said what we believe the outcome of that should be. Why is this dispute any different? Why is this government unable to say, we believe that UN Resolution 47, which we supported originally, should be in place? Why do we have that different position to all the other conflicts and territories in the world that are disputed?
Well, I would say the UK's position has been clear since the 1970s. It is for India and Pakistan to find a lasting resolution to the situation in Kashmir, taking into account the views of the Kashmiri people.
I'm grateful for the misgiven way. This government has had a policy for 50 years, as she's outlined. It hasn't worked. Do you think it's time, does the Minister think it's time to change course?
I thank the Honourable Member for raising that. But I think I have been clear, and I know that this is an issue that many members feel strongly about. But currently, the position of the FCDO is clear, and it will and he's currently abiding to his position that it's always had since the 1970s. So I know the Honourable Member also asked when last the Minister met with the Pakistani government. He met with them in June this year. He met with the Interior Minister and the Minister for Law and Human Rights to discuss the issue that is happening. During his visits, the Minister also heard from a number of civil society organisations about the biggest challenges in Pakistan's human rights landscape. With regard to the issue of freedom of religious belief, as raised by the member for Strangford, and I know that he is an advocate for this particular issue, and he has been chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for quite a long time. The UK government is committed to defending freedom of religion or belief for all and to promoting respect between different religion and non-religious communities. UK programmes promote the rights of religious minorities through facilitating interfaith dialogues, supporting the Pakistani government to develop progressive legislations and combating hate speech against marginalised religious communities online. We will continue to urge the government of Pakistan to guarantee the rights of all people, including those from religious minority communities, in accordance with international standards. And lastly, regarding the question raised around when last the Prime Minister met with the Pakistani government, he met with the Pakistani Prime Minister in April, again to raise the concerns, many of the concerns that have been raised today. So in conclusion, the government remains committed to supporting human rights, encouraging peaceful dialogue and supporting British nationals. We will continue to monitor development closely and to raise concerns where we have them. And we will continue to encourage a peaceful and lasting resolution that takes into account the wishes of the Kashmiri people. Thank you.
Imran Hussain to briefly wind up.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. If I could straight away address, I thank all the members who have taken part in this very important debate, and our constituents will no doubt have listened to all the contributions. Can I briefly address this situation in terms of the age-old policy of this is a bilateral issue? Let us be absolutely clear in this House. This is an international issue that stems from international law and the birthright of Kashmiris under international law. We in this place have a moral, historic and legal duty, and it's about time we develop the moral courage to execute that moral duty. In terms of the Minister, I'm very grateful to the Minister who's in the place today, but also to the Minister for the Middle East and Pakistan, who has regularly kept me updated, who has visited Pakistan during this period, and who assures me that he continues to monitor the situation, relay the concerns of this House, and make sure that we push and press towards a peaceful resolutions. The point I would make to the government again is I'm grateful to the over 70 now parliamentarians that continue to support the call of the All-Party Parliamentary Group, and I hope the government has heard that clearly. We will not stop. We will continue to campaign, and more parliamentarians will join this campaign. And at the root of it, I again urge our government to continue to use every diplomatic lever to press the governments of Pakistan and Azad Kashmir to immediately end the lockdown, to immediately restore all communications, to immediately allow full access to food and in particular medical supplies, to allow access to mediators and human rights organisations, and finally and immediately to resume peaceful table talks, at the heart of which must remain the inalienable human rights of Kashmiris. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The question is that this House has considered government support for human rights in Kashmir. As many of their opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order. The sit-in stands adjourned.